All right. Welcome, everybody. We have to laugh because sometimes we end up getting caught up in what we're doing and we don't notice that it was time for us to get on. Okay, anyways, welcome everybody to this evening and welcome to another episode of Advancing Consciousness series. And tonight is episode 7, and we're doing somewhat everybody's favorite topic, which is the ego. And we're going to talk about its purpose, the role, and its obsolescence. So the reason we've covered this evening, or chose to cover this evening, because we touched upon it in the different episodes and parts of episodes that we've had already, and it keeps coming up to the forefront, and I felt that it was a good time for us to understand how it works and what role it's been playing, why it's even there, and what do we do with it? Is it our friend? Is it our enemy? Is it what? You know, this is the question people ask, because a lot of people say, well, you know, it's something we have to kill, or that, you know, it's horrible, or, you know, it's our best friend. And some others say that, you know, we have to have it because we rely on it, because it identifies us. Because without the ego, we don't have an identification. We don't know who we are. And that's kind of the things that have been taught. And then we had the different levels of ego that people talk about, you know. So there's been so much talked about all over the years, and do we really understand what it is, how it actually operates, and what role it's really playing? So we figured tonight's a good night to play with it and really bring you up to speed on understanding. Now, all that's going to be shared with you, it's up to you to resonate with it or not. It's up to you. I mean, the most purest form of understanding is being shared, which is really what you already know within yourself. However, some people may not understand it or be ready for it. This is why it's key to every so often just to re-listen to it, and it does trigger your own knowing from inside. So the first thing we want to play with is, what is the ego? I mean, we hear it so much and so forth, and it's almost like it's part of who we are. You know, it's like our operating system. So the first question that comes in, was that designed into our human experience? Was it part of the design of our mind? Was it part of the design what the soul and the human entity and the body required, or it was from the original design when we retooled planet Earth 15,000 years ago? Was that always there? Was it part of the plan? And if not, how did it get there? So the first thing we're going to look at, what is it? Well, to make it very clear, what is the ego? The ego is a software, okay? It's a software program. And anybody in the computer world will understand what software is. So it's a software program. So we are saying, okay, great, we run on programs. I mean, of course, we're an operating system. You know, our body's an operating system. The whole planetary operating system is an operating system. The matrix, even the inverted one, was an operating system. So we're looking at it and say, okay, it's software and operating system. Where does it reside? It resides in our mind. It is, sometimes they call it the small mind. Sometimes they call it just, you know, it's part of the mind. So what do you call it? The ego mind, right? But the ego mind is within the overall mind. It is the software and program. Now, was it part of the original design, the latest series of the bodies that we are inhabiting at this time when the planet was retooled? And the big answer is no, it was not. Okay? No. And I'll write the rest of it. Was not part of it. So it was not part of the operating system of the original plan. And it really wasn't required until there was a modification 5,000 years later from the original retooling and the original creation of these physicalities that it was implemented. Now, why was it put in afterwards? Okay, so as I've talked about before, the original design was 15,000 years ago, and we've talked about it many times. And then 5,000 years later, at 10,000 years ago, from this point here, this is when there was a modification done. So our operating system was modified, and then the moon was brought in as a satellite. Part of that was the inverted matrix. And that was part and parcel of the changes that occurred. So not only changing our operating system, we needed something that actually reflected that modification in our operating system. One of the things that was discovered is that to have the moon as a satellite to reinforce and really hold that inverted matrix operating system, it created a change of how the environment worked and everything else. However, it required, because of the way the mind was designed, it could bypass the programming. So because we already had 5,000 years of organic matrix, since we had that going on, we already had a very established mind. So to plug in the inverted matrix, it would try to bypass on a regular basis. So in fact, to hold on and be able to truly experience the inverted matrix, there needed a software that would be an intermediate operating system that would actually some way override the already basic, or what we call established, operating system with the organic matrix, which was the organic operating system that was installed, when we were pretty well wired up and designed. So to bypass that original operating system, the organic one, something had to be the mediator. So that's when they thought, okay, let's put this software in, which we will call, it's an artificial intelligence, self-learning, and also upgrading from everything that's there, which we call the ego. So what would that do? What does the ego do? It actually creates a false narrative, a false or an inverted operating system. So the inverted operating system will actually take away from the knowing of who you are as source, having this beautiful experience in a playground that you are one with all the playmates, that you are one with it. And that the original operating set, basically, we work together as a team to enjoy and experience and grow and share amongst each other with no separation. Okay? And be able to communicate on so many levels. So in the original design, we were communicating with Gaia, with every single sentient being on the planet, including the inner civilization of the inner earth part of it, but we were also communicating with our brothers, sister souls, and so forth. Okay, so in that way, we were basically seeing the whole picture, that we were this grand, magnificent experience that we have come here to play. So there was a huge rejoicing and oneness that was experienced. So as long as that was the case, the organic was rock solid. It would not budge, because we were supporting each other in such a fashion that no one would be able to be felt that they were left alone and to fend over, or like the way we have been playing at this point in time. So the difference was, at that point, is the only way we can do this, we have to modify the way it operates so that we create that bridge, which actually caused a deviation. So when the ego was put in place, the operating system, its mandate was to basically create the illusion of separation and the illusion of polarity, And it also created distractions. And as you can see, most of us have had tons of experience with our ego. It is a huge, huge storyteller. It makes stuff up from anything it sees and anything it receives, and it doesn't matter where it's come from. And when I say that, it can be from the lineage, it can be from past lives, it can be anything, any vault that it can dig into to get information. Now, most of it would come from, whatever the human entity had stored as memories, or the body's memory storage, but a lot of times it was the subconscious mind. Now, at birth, of course, as you came in, the ego was very small. It was a very limited operating system, which kept expanding and growing within it. So that the story maker was what the ego played. Now, the purpose of the ego was, okay, so you have to understand, when we were retooled, we were equipped to operate in third dimensional consciousness, okay, with the capacity to go all the way to ninth dimensional consciousness. That meant the body was programmed for that, the mind was programmed for that, and plus all the souls will be already prepped to be able to do that, including the human entity. So all of it was designed to be able to migrate along the way. Of course, the other part of the operating system is that we're not going to make it short. We're going to give it 1,000-year minimum, or what we call average, 1,000-year average lifespan, because life was not limited at that point in time. So let's put lifespan. So you had 1,000-year lifespan. With the original operating system, you would be able to maintain your vitality and operating system, creativity and imagination and so forth, and also the body regenerating in a very pure organic state without requiring food and whatever else. But the way it operated at that point in time is that we did not need to leave and reincarnate, because we were so flexible we can switch roles and be able to, even to a point where the bodies could actually shift in a way where it would play a particular role. So again, the first 70 years of your life, you would not look like what you look now, like if you were 70 years old, from birth to 70 years old. You would maintain a youth for that full 1,000 years. So very little was actually changing in our own construct. Do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, Terry asks, in the organic matrix, did we physically interact with inner earth beings?
Yes. When we were in our organic state, we had a connection. So we would interact with them time to time. Okay? Now, they also, at that point, were also playing the role of the teachers, because they were around longer and they already had come from a different dimension to be able to host that environment on planet Earth. So at that point in time, they would be interacting with us fairly regularly, which doesn't happen now. It's very minimal of any interactions at this point, but they're always monitoring and waiting for us to get to a certain level where we can reestablish that connection, which is the plan as we move forward. So when we're looking at that, that was the design. So when the modification occurred, then everything started to change. The lifespans shortened, the aging process shortened, everything changed in that regard. So with the ego putting in place, it would actually create a construct for us to experience that separation, I said, the polarization experience, the feeling alone, feeling detached and disconnected to anything and everything, and also cutting off forms of information and communication through others and Gaia and so forth. Now, it also, with part of the modification, not only just the ego and the artificial intelligence that was plugged in, there was also a modification with our DNA. So the DNA basically at that point in time, as we on an average have 12 strands. Did I spell that right? Strands. D? Okay, not the bad. I knew it was missing something there. Okay, 12 DNA strands. So each of these strands, each of these 12 strands were also communication links to the different donors of our genetic encodements that make up this particular physicality, because the physicality was designed to be able to host many different frequencies and levels of communication, so that for us to be able to connect with our brother sister souls in different physicalities from different dimensions and different planets was very natural for us, because we already had that encodement with us. Telepathic, but we had the languaging of the communication aspect of that. And so for us, if that was left intact, fully streaming, then it didn't matter how much software was running, this was going to be continue to be supported, and it was difficult. So that's when the DNA strands had to be disconnected. So the ego's purpose at that point in time was to create all of that, but also is designed to like upside down. So in essence, whatever was a true operating system was reversed. And if you look at any of our systems in our world, you will see it reflects exactly that. So what does the ego do in ourselves? Yes, we can't see it as something evil. We can't see it as something that, was devious, because then we would have to take on the role of the ego, judging the ego sort of thing, and really looking at it in reverse. So we have to look at it for what it was. Okay, it was an operating system that disconnected and created that illusion for a different type of experience. Maybe not the original plan, however, it was introduced, it was accepted, and we utilized it. And we have utilized it for the 10,000 years. Now, of course, we're in the reversal process where we're disconnecting that. So basically right now, the inverted matrix is turned off, the moon's no longer transmitting, even though there was a full moon last night. A lot of people may have felt certain energies because we did have the moon being used as a deflector or reflector, I think it's a reflector, for some powerful energies, but there weren't the same energies that the moon was used as a transmitter or satellite. It was basically used as a way to enhance our movement forward. So even that being going on, this is still active, the artificial intelligence and ego, that still has a lot of the operating system of that nature. And that's the only reason we're still seeing things the way they are. So in essence, we have to say, okay, we accepted this became an operating system we utilized. Now, the ego itself basically that we had to believe that everything not only had to be difficult for us to make any progress, there was a lot of involvement, a price to pay, and so forth. And the fact of not even seeing ourselves as one, as separate, then it all operating system was never our natural state. Okay, so it created that as part of the operating system. Now, as I was saying earlier, the ego plays a storyteller. So basically, it basically creates over and over and over again different stories and create illusionary projections of what is, what isn't, and so forth, right? So what it does at that point with that, it's like you may have an insight to do something or go in a direction or work towards a certain goal or whatever it is, or direction or intention or anything of that nature, or just feeling that, this is my next step, this is what the ego would do, would step in and basically say, well, how do you know it's going to work? How about if you fail? Look at what happened to such and such. Look at what happened to those people. Look at what happened to you when you tried something similar, or maybe not even close to similar. But remember, in all your life, every time that you try to do something, somebody would say something about you and so forth, and they made you feel bad. Or, you want to get into a relationship or connection with somebody for you, are they going to do this, or look, they're doing that, or whatever it is, and it creates all of those doubts and stories and so forth, and that's what the ego does. So it creates a lot of confusion and so forth, and this is why a lot of people have difficulty communicating with their higher self, because the higher self is not insistent and it's not a story maker. It may create certain scenarios and experiences, But when you're tuning into a directive of saying, okay, I want to see where my journey is going, what my next step is, or anything of that nature, then we ask ourselves, we ask our higher self, and our higher self will come very clearly, very subtle, without any emotional charges or anything of that nature. That's the very first answer. It's very quick, and a lot of times you don't even finish asking the question, you already have first answer. Ego pipes right in right after that, and well, how about this, and how about that, and on and on and on and on, until to the point, whatever you heard in the beginning becomes so eluded, is so watered down and so drowned in the noise that you think that the higher self is not communicating. All you got is this, what they call monkey mind, or this chatter that's in your head all the time. Now, some people can use it as a friend because, you say, well, I have nobody else to play with, so I have my ego that keeps me entertained. But it's a very interesting entertainment. You were going to say something?
Yes, Vicky asks, were there positives to having a strong ego under the inorganic 3D matrix?
In the organic or non-organic?
In the inorganic, the non-organic 3D matrix, was there
Well, yeah,
positives to
well,
having an ego?
I mean, like the ego itself, we have to look at it, and we've talked about it. We make friends with it because, in essence, it has provided a sequence and series of experiences and a way of life that could not have been experienced without it. Okay, so that's the beauty of it. Even though we went through it for so long, we've experienced something that was not in the original design. It was very much inverted matrix and moon. Now, we could have come back and cleaned out, the inverted matrix and put that out of the equation a long time ago. However, there was such a unique experience from it, and such an interest in it, and such a, let's call it, an intrigueness? Is that a word? Intriguing. Okay, let's call it an intriguing experience about it, so that it was, okay, let's keep it going, let's keep it going, let's keep it going. Because one of the mandate was, if you were able to evolve and become more enlightened while this was all in effect, that would have required such a skill set, such a self-grounding, a self-direction, that you would set a pretty high bar on how it would be to be able to function. So, like I've said in part of the series, is that, it was revered that you came on planet Earth and were able to have the experiences you did and whatever you've learned from it. But a lot of it was because the ego played a very powerful role, the inverted matrix played a powerful role that we were experiencing. So the fact that we started off in organic 3D and we ended up with the majority in 2D and what we called inverted 3D, that was a series of experiences that was not going to be able to be experienced. So we can't look at it and say that was bad, that was wrong, or anything of that nature, because as long as you're saying it's right, wrong, good, bad, you're basically operating through here, still playing out the inverted matrix part and going into the 2D and inverted 3D part, because that's the only part that's going to judge anything. Because the judgment is really coming from this. It's not coming from your true essence. Your true essence may evaluate and observe and make suggestions for modification to align yourself a little bit more. But the ego does is judge. And it judges without no answers of how you can change anything. It just basically makes you feel a certain way. And this is why we also find ourselves judging other people, because the ego is designed for that. So the purpose of the ego, to go even deeper into it, the artificial intelligence, was really to get us from an organic 3D state and to go backwards. So here we are to evolve. The inverted matrix and the what do you call it? The ego, the artificial intelligence, was to devolve. So basically going backwards. One's moving forward in state from 3 all the way to 9 in different stages. And basically the ego's operating system is we're going to go into inverted 3D and then we're going to go into 2D. So the deeper you get into the lower, the more disconnect you have from everything that exists. You lose communication with your own self and with all other connections of yourself on the playgrounds and all the other realms that we play with. So that's what the ego does. So its purpose was always to kind of come in, as you came in, to play the role so you would forget more than ever who you are. Now, it would take your true essence, get you out of it, and then create a false essence, a self-labeling, a self, what we call determination of who you are. So for you, if you did not have an ego, you couldn't just say, I am this or I am that, and say, well, I am this profession, I am this education, I am this gender, I am this culture, I am this whatever, okay? And label itself and categorize itself and then grandize, I think it's called, but grandize itself to be able to say, okay, those are who I am, right? So one of the things that has been talked about is that with that, we would lose those identities, but then we would actually go to a point where you're nothing but everything, but at the same time you realize that you have come here to play particular roles and experience itself, and you can easily move from one role to another with ease without any labeling and without holding on to anything. So that's the thing it does. So it plays a very powerful role in us because it lets us think and feel and react and respond a very particular way. So an ego can go in the driver's seat for most of us, and it really drives how we interact with life, how we play, what choices we make, what direction we go, who and who we don't end up engaging with, playing with, and so forth. So that's kind of what determines, so it plays a very powerful role on how we experience life. And that has a beautiful dance with it, and it's very powerful and has been very powerful. But the only reason that we've put a lot of this stuff out of the equation and the ego is actually going through the process of deprogramming itself is just because we're stepping into the next level. Now, so that gives us an idea what it is, which is basically a software program with artificial intelligence so that it's self-learning from various sources. Now, of course, the ego itself cannot stand on its own for a very long period of time because it requires reinforcement. So what occurs here is the ego was highly dependent on the inverted matrix to support its feed of resources, tactics, and maneuverability in it. Now, even though that's already has built in on its own, but it's not as stable without getting constant upgrade. So the inverted matrix was getting upgraded from the moon, so the moon's no longer supporting the matrix. Matrix has been turned off. Now the ego is a standalone. Well, what happens with the ego? The ego doesn't do very well alone. Not for long, anyways. So what it does, it looks for other egos to play with. And there's lots of those around. There's lots of people. Everybody's got egos. So what is it going to do? It's going to stimulate each other to create such intensities. And it really likes to thrive on low frequency and granding. I can't even think of it. Self-grandiosis? Grandeur or whatever. Self-grandeur or whatever. Anyways, sometimes I have to play with the words because it comes in my mind, but I can't pronounce it or even say it right. Anyway, so with that, it actually elevates itself. Or, in fact, it goes into the thing, who's better than the other and so forth. Or if it gets into the driver's seat where it wants to create very low states of emotional reaction and charges, then it will engage with each other. So you will find the ego is going to want to play with other egos. So it's going to push the buttons for one and then push the other. Now, there's a good part to that because then it shows you what program, especially if you're paying attention. But at the same time, the ego likes to play with another ego, even though it's always wanted to do that and always has done that to a degree, but now it's stepping it up because now it's saying, okay, I'm not getting any more feed. We need to huddle together now. We can't work alone because we don't have Grand Poobah here feeding us any longer. We're not getting the mother load here. So we're going to have to make do. Let's come together and let's play together. I bug you, you bug me, and we now can create this thing. So we can make sure that these individuals that the ego is operating in will now figure it out that in one way or another that they don't need us, and the fact that in one way or another they're much grander than anything we can provide. Okay, so we don't want to figure that out. So that's keep. So that puts us in a bit more of an attentive state where we're looking at it, and we have to pay attention to when the ego, that little chatter thing, is creating all these stories, and when it likes to carry other stories with others, because it does do that very well. So just to keep in mind, it's going to look for other playmates. So sometimes you're going to find that, okay, certain environments and so forth, you don't want to be exposing yourself, not because you're picking up the energy, it's just going to find a playmate, so it's going to want to play, right? So it depends on what state you're in. As you move along, then you're not going to be giving the ego that much power, so in essence, you're not going to end up engaging with others to do that. Now, like I said, there's a beauty to that too, because you're going to show what programs that it can use, because the ego requires several resources for it to function. First of all, it has to go into what we call the subconscious mind. It has to go into the subconscious mind to look for resources. So what does the subconscious mind do? The subconscious mind basically stores your experiences from the moment you were born till now. And within that, everything that's happened to you. Now, the ego along the way likes to label what happened to you. And it doesn't know how to label it until it gets resources and saying, this is the label we throw on this. So for example, you had a situation in school where you were picked on, right? So you were picked on, which means nothing, you wouldn't even feel hurt, because without the ego's determination, you wouldn't feel that. So here it is, the ego goes, oh, wait a minute, picked on. You got to feel hurt. Oh, by the way, you got to feel that nobody likes you. By the way, and then it'll make up stories around that. And so what happens is it takes that experience of school, that one experience, and it puts a label on it, what it means and what it should mean, and it's going to use that as a resource moving along your life, because every so often it'll bring it up to the surface and bring it to the point where it says, oh, this is what it means, and this is how you need to feel. So the ego doesn't only just give you the story, but it locks in a label and definition, but also charges the emotion, and then you have all of it together. So in fact, it tells you not only how to feel, but you're going to feel it in such a way where you really can go into the depth and activate certain other programs. The other thing it stores, it likes to access, is programs. And what are the programs? Well, like I said, they're going to be labels, but at the same time, those labels become a default program. So whenever something of this nature comes about, we're saying that, okay, this is not only how we feel, how we respond, this is how we view things because of it. Okay, so that becomes a program. So we do run on programs, but our really natural program doesn't actually label anything. It just sees everything as an experience, and then it can use those experiences in any which way it chooses to without labeling it. Because every time you label something and define something, you're actually encapsulating it, and you're actually creating pockets of experiences, which, like a groove on a record, once it pops in there, it goes in there, and then it starts to play the song from that point. So whenever it goes in there, that capsule gets locked in, and to come back out of it is a little harder to do so. So that's kind of what occurs. So this is the thing. So the programs itself, once it's locked in, it becomes difficult to pull out of it. Not that you can't, but you won't be able to do it as easy. Now, without the ego labeling it and so forth, you, as the true operating system, would just see the experience as an experience, You can go through any sequence of that experience, but you're not encapsulating, you're not locking it in, and every time that you experience, even if it's identical, it's going to be different because you're allowing your state of consciousness to see it in that way because your consciousness is always advancing. You're going to see the energies of the collective, yourself, and everything else that's going on, so it's always new anyways. So even though it would have any of that. But then there's no locked in program because every program that is designed from its organic state is self-learning and self-growing, not the limit, but to expand, okay? And not to minimize or reverse the process, but to expand and move forward. You were going to say something.
Yes, Lex E asks, how come this game of life had no boundaries set for the inverted matrix? It was a free-for-all experience in which even things that seem unforgivable are allowed from a human perspective. So in the inverted matrix, no holds bar. You could do anything, it seems. Like there was no boundaries set.
Without the matrix? Inverted
with
matrix?
the inverted matrix. Within the inverted matrix,
Mhm.
it seemed like a very huge selection of everything and anything. You could do anything or anything. So she was, or they were wondering, why were there no boundaries set for the inverted matrix, or is that just part? That's just part of the experience, right?
Yeah, it
What
was
we
part of the
needed to
experience. The
have.
design was not to have any boundaries because at that point in time, there was boundaries, but the boundaries were self-imposed boundaries, and the boundaries would actually create infringements. Which because the purpose of it was to create chaos, create confusion, create anarchy, and all of that stuff, so that in fact, because in the organic matrix, not that there was no rules, but there was an honoring and respect of sorts where you saw each aspect of yourself as you, so that in fact there would be nothing that would actually take away from anybody or be done in a way where you're taking advantage of anybody. That wasn't even a consideration. That was not even any part of the operating system. In the inverted matrix, it was all about that, where you have to take advantage of other people. You got to be better than other people. You got to compete against other people and so forth. And you could see how that all works in the world itself, right? And the idea, the illusionary idea is that if we compete, we become better. Well, in the organic matrix, in the organic operating system, it was not about competing. It was to be able to extend yourself, to be able to do more without requiring somebody else to compete with. So in fact, you can play with each other, but there was no winner or loser. You just saw how far you can go with your experiences without having what we do now. There's the winner, there's the loser. You feel great for the winner and bad for the loser. And the fact of, there's winners and losers in business and all types of experiences and so forth. So that, you have to look after yourself so that, you would sell or do certain things to take advantage of people or so forth. Now, there's another part to all of that. Even with the inverted matrix, without the boundaries, okay, there was still a requirement, because that could not be infringed, a requirement, that part of that operating system was that unless it's agreed upon for one reason or another, it doesn't matter how skewed the agreement may have been, it had to require an agreement. So that means that if you were going to be a victimizer to a person and that person was going to be a victim, you may have chosen to be the victimizer, but the person that's going to be the victim had to agree to be the victim. Maybe not just for you, but for many other people that were going to play the victimizer role. So there had to be an agreement. So it really never went beyond it, except the fact that the respect and the honoring of each other and the supporting of each other was not in the operating system. I mean, it was in the operating system, but that part was pretty well turned off. And then it was in the inverted matrix. We didn't have any of that, because in the inverted matrix you can push it so far that there was no consideration for one another, because at that point everybody's separate. And if you remember, and sometimes it's still talked about, the what does it go? The strongest or the fittest win, however it goes. I don't know how it goes. Well, anyways, if you remember, it's really the strong ones that survive, the ones that are more cunning, and the ones that are going to be much more, imaginative in the sense of, how can I skew things and so forth, would be the winner, and everybody else would be the loser, and all and so forth, right? Survival of the fittest. Thank you. So that was all in the inverted matrix. That was not our natural operating system at any point in time. So with that, and that's how the food chain came about, and this is why animals eat animals and so forth. Not all of them do, but a good chunk of them do. And then a lot of the operating systems for the insect world and so forth became something that we had to be careful of because of that. So the environment was changed to play that type of role. And so all of that came about, and we were kind of okay with it because the ego said it was okay. This is the way of life. This is how it works. Okay, and if the ego wasn't in place, education would be very difficult too, because in fact you couldn't sit into a school and be fed information that was incorrect, or information that was outdated, or information that was in some way limiting you. Okay? And you wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to accept, because the higher consciousness is saying, no, that's not true. This is how it really operates, and you wouldn't even be having any interest. But what happens, you start to condition the ego to keep you to follow the rules. You get programmed to say, we got to go to school, we got to learn these facts and figures, we got to get little pieces of paper that tell you that you've achieved whatever you achieved, and then you go out in the work world, and then you have to go work, and you have to sacrifice your time or whatever to make a living and so forth. That is not your true operating system in any way, shape, or form. However, in the inverted matrix, that was the operating system, and the ego said that's how it has to be done. And it reinforced it because it would continue to convince you by creating carrots, dangling the carrot. Well, if you do this, then you can have this ideal life. If you have this, you can do this, and you have that, and then you'll be revered, and then you'll stand out as famous and popular and whatever else, whatever else it would use in that point. But for it to use that, it had to have a reference point. These things mean that you're good or great or famous or fantastic or loved or whatever it is. And if you had other different rules, then you were not. It was all the opposite, right? Because your true operating system didn't have that as a gauge at all. It was like, we learn, we play, we experience, we grow, we do all types of amazing things, and we just create more amazing things and continue to expand and experience ourselves more and more. It didn't have, markers of that sort, because the moment you have markers, then you were going down the path to reach that marker, and it could be an outdated marker, or a marker that was an illusionary marker in the first place, even though everything's an illusion, but an illusionary marker that brought you to this kind of dead end sort of thing looking, and then you have to find something else and so forth. So the ego also tells you, okay, you need to reach this level before you could feel good. You got to reach this level before you will stand out, or whatever it may be. That's what the role of the ego does. Okay, so to put it right down to the nuts and bolts type of thing, it doesn't matter how much of all of this is in place or has been in place, and we're still working through it. We can't see it as anything evil. We can't see it as something that we have to kill or anything of that nature. We have to respect and understand that it played a particular role in our life, something that we could have not experienced without it. Without all of this construct, we couldn't have experienced what we can experience. This playground couldn't be that way. However, even though it wasn't the original design, and it was implied and added in later, and now we're in the process of reversing it. So since we've reversed these two parts, now this part is in the process of reversing. We are reversing it. We're involved with this. So this is why we're talking about it, because we're starting to notice, okay, this is what the role it plays. Now, as I said before, the ego, has been always said, okay, we require it. Now, there's also, I'm going to make some room here somewhere. Where's my eraser? I don't think we need this for now. We got a good understanding of it.
Franco, someone
Yes.
is asking, is Darwinism a product of the inverted matrix?
Yes.
Okay. And are humans the only ones that have ego, AI?
This 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 is this sophisticated, yes, and for this long, yes. Um, it has been tried in other places, in other planets, but long gone. Um, there are different versions of them that has been used, and some are still applied. But the one that we've had, ours has been probably the most challenging. I'm not going to say it's the unique of all uniqueness. In a way, it is. I shouldn't say that because it is. But at the same time, none of them were designed as well as this one and maintained as long as it has for 10,000 years. Now, this is why we're on the fast track, because of the fact that we want to take this out of the equation so we can actually go back to our organic operating system and be able to now, of course, be fully into organic 3D and 5D, and over the years become only 5D instead of having the two channels or two platforms to work with. Okay, so there's two very prominent ego operating systems within the ego itself. One is external. There's the external ego, and then we have the internal. And I'll explain what they are. Okay, the external ego, its main operating system about it is blame and projection. Okay, it does everything possible to externalize the reason your life is the way it is. So basically, the story it tells you, it's about that person's problem, it's the world's problem, it's the government's problem, this problem, that problem, whatever it is. And these are the culprits. And you are subject to those so-called culprit, or subject to those rules or whatever is playing out at that point in time. So it never ever, the external ego will never let you look at yourself. So the main thing is blame. Blame everyone, everything. So if you know anybody of that, and they blame the systems and blame everything under the sun for their life, they blame their parents, they blame their friends, they blame their teachers, they blame whatever. Family dynamics, you name it. Work, whatever. Government, institutions, whatever, for their life. Good or bad. And what somebody's ever done to them, or possibly didn't do, that they were told that they had to be done. So that's the external ego, which projects everything out. Okay? And most of us have a part of that, and some have a lot of it, more, because that kind of plays out with part of what you've taken on. But that's the external ego. The internal ego is the critic within you. It's always blaming you. You screwed up. You did this. You're a failure. You're whatever. And it's going to come out with everything under the sun and make you feel bad, no matter even if something is somewhat good. Because even if something was happening that it's been labeled as good, well, the shoe is going to drop and everything is going to fall apart. What do they want out of this? How could that person be in my life when I'm just such and such, and they're amazing people or amazing person? They're going to figure it out that I'm a fake or anything of that nature. So that's what the internal ego does. It basically blames you for everything, and it always puts the onus on you. So a lot of people use that, even in the spiritual community. You're responsible, right? Well, yes, you are the creator, but you're not to blame of your creation. You're basically to look at your creation and say, how do I want to tweak this creation and what I'm experiencing to align with my newest state of who I am? Versus like, oh, yeah, I screwed it up, I did it wrong, I'm not good enough, or whatever it is, because that's what the internal. Now, some of us are gifted, okay? And we have a bit of both or a lot of both, you know? You're going to blame out, and then when you can't find more resources, then you're going to internalize. You have both, okay? Everybody has, to a certain degree, both. But some only have one over the other, as you probably already experienced from others. So the main focus depends on those. So it all depends on who to project on. So the externals are always looking for somebody to blame. Okay, so something happens to you, it was because that person was a jerk, because that person did not respect you, that person didn't love you, that person hurt you. Where the internal with the same situation is, while you were a screw up, you couldn't see that they were there to manipulate you. You knew that they were going to stay with you. Or the fact that, you weren't good enough in the first place. Remember all the times you have failed. These are kind of the dialogues you're going to get from the different versions of the ego. They're all the same. But they just look at which one, works best for you and which one it's going to focus on. So that's that. The other thing is the ego likes ownership and likes control. Two very powerful things. It likes to control everything and control people. Okay? So, and situations and circumstances. And if it can't control it, then it's going to not, cooperate. It's going to make life very colorful and interesting. The other thing is it likes to own everything. It has to have control over people, situations, but not only control and ownership, is that I have to own everything. I have to have everything as under my jurisdiction for me to be able to feel that I can, manage my particular life. Because this whole thing of owning properties, owning water, owning land, and owning whatever, all the different stuff, resources and things of that nature, that's because in the artificial intelligent inverted matrix and ego, it says, oh, I landed on this piece of land, I'm going to claim it mine, and it's mine. In this true operating system, nobody owns anything. Everything is shared equally across the board so that you can go anywhere around the world and you can enjoy while you're here. Anything. But everybody's a steward. Everybody takes care of everything wherever they are. So you really leave whatever's there or build on so that the next person that comes along can enjoy it, and you're moving on to something else and you're enjoying what somebody else left behind. So the thing is, everybody creates an environment where everyone can enjoy and nobody has ownership. The other thing about ownership is that as long as you're in ownership, you end up restricting yourself, because the more stuff you own, the more stuff owns you. That means you're more responsible. You have to take care of it. You have to make sure it's maintained in one way or another. It also locks you in to be able to have the freedom to move around, because that holds you down. I'm not saying we can't have that type of an experience where you could say, well, I really want to stop here for a while and enjoy that part of it. That would be natural for us to do that if you chose to do so. However, this whole ownership thing where, I need to control ownership, and then anybody that infringes on anything that I own, now we're talking something altogether different. So that's kind of what also is played out in the artificial intelligence, or what we call the ego. So to go further in that, the question comes up, do we feel that we have a relationship with ego that if we had to give it away, give it up, will we feel that we're in a loss? Question. That's a question you ask yourself. Do you have a relationship that I need it for me to be able to function? Because if that's the case, that's fine. You can hold on to it as long as you choose. But it comes with certain restrictions. And that's okay, because the restrictions may not be restrictions for you. It could be part of the journey and part of the fun for a period more of time. So you say, okay, I can't let it go or I can let it go. But what's happening now is that, as we said, these are the roles, the purpose the ego has. Is it reached obsolescence? Has it reached this point? That's the question you ask yourself. If it's reached obsolescence, then what happens? We're able to say, okay, it's no longer required. It was a beautiful ride, okay? And we are more advanced because of it, and we've enjoyed the ride. However, now we're at a point where we're ready to move on without the training wheels, because in a way it acted as a training wheels with brakes on it, of course. But, at the same time, we can't look at the ego and say it was a bad thing, okay, and that we have to judge it or anything of that nature. It was a beautiful tool that has served for a long period of time and may still serve some of us for a period of time longer, and that's okay. Any transition takes a bit of time. But by paying attention to how it works, you may just start to eliminate its the way it functions within you and how much power it has in dictating how you feel and experience and so forth, and how the stories are coming through for you. So when you're going through the experience of the ego, you got to see it as your friend. It's your buddy. It's been with you for quite some time. It has played a role in a big way, a way that you wouldn't have, like I said, you wouldn't be able to have had that experience without it. So it served. Now we're saying, okay, I'm stepping into a state of consciousness that is now restoring the organic operating system with its update, because this is not just going to come exactly as it is. It comes with an update. And there's many versions of updates that have occurred. So it's going to be related, update, to today. And it just continues to update. So I'd like to have this to come back into my operating system. So therefore, this that is opposite to that operating system or limiting or access to that operating system, I'm going to start eliminating it. Okay? But you never fight, judge, because you got to see that the ego has been your friend, and as any friend, you love them, but at some point the friendship may not be conducive any longer. So without having a judgment about the friend, you say, thank you, friend. You've been a loyal, and you have to say it's been loyal, a loyal, trusted friend. But now I'm going to relieve you, release you, allow you to go free because you're not required in the direction that I'm going. And eventually, because it's not being supported, and if it goes, you're going to see that it actually starts to shift more and more as you go along. So it actually starts to become less empowering over you, because it starts to lose its stability within itself. So it doesn't have the same grasp and operating system that it had before. So the only reason we're shifting away from any of these stages, including the ego, is because we are going into a stage where it's not required any longer. That's the thing. And that's why we're saying it's becoming obsolete or obsolescence, because of the fact that it's not part of where we're going. See, if you're to operate in the organic 3D or the organic 5D, then the ego is just going to be an obstacle, because it doesn't like to work in the organic 3D and organic 5D. It's really designed to work in the inverted 3D and inverted or the 2D. Okay, so it's in the world of backwardsness, and it's in the world of total disconnect from any aspect of yourself besides I am a physical form with a mind. I'm here today, I'm gone tomorrow, type of thing. So that operating system, and that is fully operating system with very minimal, next to nothing consciousness within it. So that's what it says. It says, listen, I'm going to take care of you. Because remember, the ego is one of the other tools it likes. The ego uses this thing called safety. Okay? Being safe. I'm going to have to practice writing weird. There we go. Safe. Whenever you say to yourself, am I going to be safe? That's the one that's saying it. It's not your higher self. It's not your human entity. It's not even your body. Because the body says there's no such thing. We have experiences or don't have experience. We have the freedom to decide if we're going to have that experience or not. The ego says we're not in control of our experience. Anything that we put ourselves outside of the parameter that we say it is, then you're going into unsafe territory. It's like anything that's going on. Well, there's viruses out there. That's going to be unsafe for you to go outside in that way. And say, well, we got to be extra careful. That's the ego saying that. From a higher perspective, say, do I need it or don't need it? If I don't need it, no matter what, I'm not going to have it. But if I need it, doesn't matter how protective I am or how safe I create the illusion, I'm going to have the experience anyways. If I need it for one purpose or another, either to learn, to grow, to shift, or to just basically, hey, it's a colorful experience. Let's see what we can do it. Or let's use it so that I can have the experience of it and then transmute it and assist the collective because of it. Those are the ways it looks at it, right? So you have to understand at this point, it looks at, okay, all right. It looks at how is it going to serve any part of it. And it chooses from that point. So you're basically the core essence of yourself doesn't need to have all of this stuff. It just chooses. Do we have this experience or that experience? How do we do it? We can move in easily, in and out. Okay? So you see, how many people do what we call risky activities? Activities, it could even be work. And they have no incidents that occur. Others have many things happening to them that you would see as negative. What's the difference? Is it luck? What is luck? Is there such a thing? Or is it the fact that at some point it serves them to have that experience because either affects them in one way or another where they're making a change in their life, making something aware of a program or operating system, or the fact that it affects the family or whoever's connected to them. So you're looking at those experiences and it looks at the experience itself and says, how does it serve? It does not go into safe, unsafe, or anything of that nature. It really looks at how can we use any part of it? Now, you've come on the planet. You knew the ego was here. You knew that was our original operating system, what it was. You knew we were going through a transformation or transitional aspect of it through what the human condition or the human operating system was and the planet itself. You chose to be here. Not only that, you chose to take on the ego. You chose on to take any part of it. Now, not everybody has the same intensity of the ego. A lot of the ones that have come in take a very small amount just to get a taste of it rather than have it control them. Others said, hey, let me have the full load. I want to really experience this. Then, of course, they get into the game and the game kind of starts to run itself and so forth. So anyways, you had a question or a comment?
Yes. Evelyn asked, how can we switch off the ego quickly? Or is that a long process?
Okay. So the fact that you're saying that you want to switch off the ego quickly, it's ego talking. Because from a higher perspective, say, all right, it's not about turning off the ego. It's learning, observing, and seeing how it plays a role, and then re-establish your own operating system. Because in a lot of cases, many of us has been so conditioned to operate within this ego directive. Without it, you may feel lost. In fact, you may feel in a way you don't fish out of water sort of thing because you don't know how to navigate. Because you've had this instructor all the time and the instructor leaves. So it creates a bit of an imbalance. So the thing is now, it's a switching over that occurs. You're basically taking the ego and switching it over to consciousness. So basically you're looking at ego over to consciousness. So this is why I've talked about it for 7 years now, to go into the observer state. In that way, you practice on connecting with yourself from a heart level, from a solar plexus level, which is your human entity. A heart is your soul, and then connecting with your body and communicating and really getting input from that, and then also observing what input's coming in from the ego, and then you could decide, do I need this part of it or not? Should I bring some part of this so I can, balance my transition? Because the ego itself also, by understanding it, will give you the tools to be able to assist others. Not to fix anybody or anything like that, but to share with the steps you've gone. But if it's all disappeared and say, well, I don't have it anymore, how did it go? Well, it just turned off one day, right? And others may not be ready to experience that because they wouldn't be able to function. So what it does is it gives you an opportunity. So it's not the fact of turning it off. First, you make it your best friend. Make it your amigo. I think that was in one of the shows we talked about. Make the ego your amigo, not, what was the opposite of amigo? Anyways, it's not your enemy. Let's put it this way. It's not your enemy, it's your amigo, your friend, okay? So make it your friend. Say, okay, listen, you did a great job, fantastic. We've been pals for a long time. We've enjoyed every aspect of this journey up to this point in time, and it's been a blast. Could have never done it without you. You've kept me company. You've kept me sometimes feeling insane, sometimes feeling sane because of the fact that you kept me entertained and all of these different things. I'd be able to see things I'd never been able to see, all the different twists, even though it was polarized or anything of that nature, and it was great. However, as much as I love you and everything else, we're going to have to, change our relationship. We need to kind of start parting ways because in a way we're not here to be able to walk side by side any longer, because your mandate and my mandate are very different at this point in time. I'm choosing to enlighten, I'm choosing to advance to higher states of consciousness, and you're not designed to handle that. It's not about training the ego, it's about basically taking the ego out of the equation eventually along the way. But the thing is, the beauty of it now, it's going to move a lot quicker. So the turning off, so-called turning off, will happen more and more. Now, probably quite a few of you on the call. There's quite a few that are going to be watching the video later and already realize that what was it a year ago till now, the dialogue has calmed down quite a bit. You will also notice in the last several months that either it's been super active in one way, just kind of get you the last kick, or because it likes to engage with other egos, or in essence, you've noticed that you're more aware of what's going on and you're actually now communicating in a sense of taking back some of the roles that were handed out for the ego to play, and really basically bringing it to yourself to be able to navigate with it without having that input. The other thing is too, we have to also understand that we with the ego too, because when you get to the point where the ego is no longer active, you kind of go into a state of going, wow, who am I now? You everything looks so different because there's nothing defining what you're seeing, okay? So all of a sudden, you're almost like back into learning how to navigate. You're learning how to determine what you're looking at and what you can do with it, because you haven't had to do that before, because the ego is really busy, basically shaping everything for you. So that's kind of the thing. So if it turns off completely, that whole thing of loss of identity may be a bit of a shock for a while. In a sense, it's like, I don't know who I am anymore. And some of you have been experiencing that because the label part started to drop, and then you ask yourself, like, who am I? What am I even here to do? Like, I can't see purpose in life, because ego gives you purpose. It's an illusionary purpose, but it's a little purpose. Well, if you do this job, you do this, and you make lots of money, and you do all of this other stuff, and you get yourself popular with other people, you're making, that's your purpose. Your purpose is to be greater than everybody, and then retire, and then raise grandchildren, or just go out and golf all day, or do something. It gives you purpose. But now, you take that purpose out of the way, and now you got to find your true purpose. Your true purpose, of course, you came here to experience, play, and so forth, without labels, without, determination, what is or what isn't. So that's kind of the difference. So see this as a transition as you're going along. It's not about turning it off. And this applies to everybody. We're not turning it off like switch, which in some cases will happen. Absolutely. You get to that point, it just turns off. But at this point is start going into the driver's seat. And to do that, you actually put at bay that part of you that's the ego part that's communicating all the time. Say, oh, hold off, buddy. Okay, I'm stepping in. So you just say, higher self, step into the driver's seat, and that's navigate from a more conscious state rather than from a story, program, belief system, program, projection that we've been playing with at this point in time. So it's a switching from one. It's like going in, handing off the ego, and allowing your higher self to come in. Because a lot of us don't even know how to communicate with the higher self, because of the fact that the only dialogue we know of is the ego. So to turn that off and then not have a navigation. Because this is a great experience for you in any way along the way. So, utilize it for what happens with all of this as the ego becomes less and less active in your operating system, you discover more and more who you are. Okay? As you're purging the inverted matrix, as you're purging the inverted 3D, 2D, and you're letting go of the ego dictation system where it tells you what is and how it works and what doesn't work and all of that stuff. Once that comes out of the equation, you get to know yourself more. You get to know who you are from source essence capacity and really take the journey of your life to the next level. So it's a transition that we're going to do. We can expedite the transition by being aware of it and just following the steps. Now, part of the workshop that we're going to be doing on the 21st, right? Yep. That's what we're aiming for. We'll cover a little bit more because we'll do some processes around the ego. I think that was in there, wasn't it? Probably. Okay. Anyways, so thank you again as we've concluded episode 7. Lovely ego. Everybody might have a really good understanding now and have fun. Please repeat this if you have a different understanding and see this as your friend that, is not really required to be in your relationship moving forward because it's not where you need to play any longer, and that's all it's about. Okay, great. Till next time, is there any other public announcements or stuff like that?
Not yet.
All right, stay tuned. Our next one is Thursday.
Same time?
Yeah, unless we decide to change it.
Next week then. Let's do it next week.
Okay, so yes, this coming Thursday at 7 p.m. We'll have episode 8, and we'll be talking about some other amazing topic. I think we were also considering doing addressing some of the questions.
Possibly. And
Okay.
then next week we're thinking of changing the time to 4 p.m. and it'll just be Tuesday and Thursday next week.
Next
Correct.
week, and then after that it'll be Tuesday, Thursday, for Saturday. No, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Yes. Okay. So the only reason next week is because on Saturday we have a full day workshop. Okay. So great. We'll see you on Tuesday.